So we're finishing off the laws of Rosh Chodesh and starting the laws of Yom Tov, of holidays, which is coming up. We're coming up to the month of holidays, which are not easy laws at all. Actually, in some ways more difficult than the laws of Shabbos. Let's bring up the page. Okay, so we're holding the last law of the laws of Rosh Chodesh. Now it says like this. Let's say we're talking about the we want to sanctify the new moon. So we said we can do it up until half of the month. So if it's going into the 14th, which is the night of the Megillah reading, and the question is, do we first read the Megillah if we have an opening? Because basically, we're dealing with a scenario which could be in the winter, and Elder is at the end of the winter. Sometimes it's kind of deep into the winter, depending on the year, where there hasn't been the moon available for sanctifying the new moon from, let's say, the 3rd, 7th, till the 14th. So the fact that there's an opening now, it could be kind of an anxiety. We don't know if it's going to remain like that. So if the moon doesn't show until the night of the reading of the Megillah, which is the 14th, Yikatru Tchilas Alvana, Megillah. What comes first? First, sanctify the new moon, Kiddush Chodesh, and then we'll do the reading of the Megillah. What about if we see the moon? Someone calls out. I'm not sure who would be noticing it. Let's say they're reading the Megillah under the sky, and the moon shines through during the reading of the Megillah itself. Imu bizman. If it's possible that afterwards you'll still have time to do it, you shouldn't interrupt the Megillah, and you should wait till you finish and then sanctify it. But if it passes, if the whole community hasn't had the opportunity to sanctify the new moon, you would stop the Megillah reading, sanctify the new moon, excuse me, and then you would complete the Megillah. If we're talking about just an individual, to stop the reading of the Megillah by the community for the sake of an individual, so either they would wait for him, which that doesn't make sense, that we wouldn't do, so he would have to finish the Megillah on his own and not continue with the minyan. So here the Noda B'Yehuda says that we know we've learned this in the laws of Purim in our classes of Megillah, that part of the reading of the Megillah falls under the idea of Pirsum Nisa, to sanctify, to announce the public announcement of the miracle, which happens through the reading of the story. That comes first, and because you would be doing it publicly, the community, that comes first. So you should first finish the Megillah. Now, I'm not certain the scenario over here, because we said before that first of all you would have up to the 15th. Okay, obviously the 14th is the night, so I'm not sure what he means if he's talking about time, because we do say that's 20 that a month is 29 and a half days and parts, so you have to count all the parts in the days to see when the new moon came in, and maybe let's say you're reading the Megillah at, I don't know, 10 o'clock at night, and if you finish the Megillah at 11 o'clock, by that time you'd already passed 50% of the 29 and a half days and the 77 parts, whatever we read last week. Or if he's talking about the concern just that the clouds would cover the Megillah. Either of them are equal. So 34, because the mitzvah that is constant has precedence, or also might get cloudy. So he says the reason is cloudy. One is because Tadr v'she'ena Tadr means Tadr is we sanctify the new moon we Kiddush Chodesh, we do it every single month. That's 12 times, 13 times a year. Megillah is once a year, so the new moon comes before the Megillah in precedence because it's more constant. And also, it may get cloudy, and then that's another concern, and you will not be able to sanctify the moon. But the Megillah can be read later as well. You don't need the good. So that's the Nod B'Yehuda. So it's the same Nod B'Yehuda quoted before, later, at the end of the law. So this law is based on the Nod B'Yehuda. The Nod B'Yehuda was, of course, the Rabbi Landau of the city of Prague. He's buried in Prague, in the others, what's called the New Cemetery. He lived 300 years ago, but it's called the New Cemetery. That precedence to mitzvah derabanan. So he says, which is the idea of presuma nisa comes first, before the biblical commandment, or I mean the rabbinic commandment of sanctifying the new moon. Okay, so this completes the laws of Rosh Chodesh. If we have any questions on the Rosh Chodesh, Barbara, I sent you last week the davening. I think it's pretty much over here. Just go through it quickly. But any other questions before we go to Yom Tov, let me know. So just to go over the schedule according to Chabad of how we daven. We do Shachris through Shmona Esrei. With a chazan, that would be Chazar Sashas, the repetition. Without a chazan, after the Shmona Esrei, one would say the half Hallel, depending on your custom about blessings or not. Then you would have, we have in Chabad a special end after that's unique only to Rosh Chodesh. We don't say it in other times of Hallel, which is the Avram Zaken prayer, which is about 2 lines. Then we do the song of the day. Then we do Haishienu, which is the end of every day of the song of the day according to Chabad Nusach. On Rosh Chodesh, we would add chapter 104, which is Baruch Nafshi. In the month of Elul, we would add chapter 27, which is the Dav Hashem Mari, so that's only 1 month of the year. On Rosh Chodesh. Then we would do Ashrei, which is the Ashrei before Musaf. We would do the Valat Sion. And then we would do Tilim of the day, which according to Chabad, we say Tilim of the month, the day divided by the month. Then we would do the addition, the Musaf prayer, which is the second Amidah. And then we finish off with En Kelekenu and Elenu. That is the schedule of davening according to Chabad. And Barbara, you wanted to know where would be a good place to break if you couldn't do it all at once, would be after the David Hashem Ori, or after Hayom Yom, Baruch Nafshi. So after number 6 on a typical month is when you could take you take a break, because the Ashri Velitzin is already connected to Musaf. And then you finish off the davening at a later time. Yes, Barbara.
That's my next question. I could break it at that point, and then like I could say that first part on my way over on the ferry, and then I could say the second part on my way home in the afternoon. That would work.
Depending on the winter or summer months, but if it's in depending on time, also what time you take the ferry back. But if you're before Shkia, before the end of the day, then you can, yeah.
Okay, yeah, because
you have
I
to
take the ferry over at about 6:25 in the morning.
Okay.
And over there, I get at the ferry dock at 7, and then when I get off at 2:30, I'm sitting there for a little while waiting for the ferry so I can start praying, but that's like a little after 2:30 or so.
2:30 is fine any time of the year, I believe. So that should be fine. 2:30 p.m. Okay. Of course, preferably to do it all together, but we're talking about a situation where you can't. Okay. We're starting now the laws of Yom Tov. Now, what's complicated about the laws of Yom Tov is the leniencies creates a strictness, because Shabbos kind of is clean cut. I mean, it's of course no way easy, and we went through months, more than a few months, over a year of studying the laws of Shabbos. But it's not pretty much that much you can do, right? There's no cooking, there's no fire, there's no preparing. There's certain preparations that you could do of basic things like salad making, etc. But to no cooking foods. So we cook our foods and we pre-cook our food and keep our foods, as we learned according to all the laws about if there's ways to reheat our food on Shabbos in a way that's permissible. So all those are laws of Shabbos, as difficult as they are. But there's kind of a major restriction. There's not much that you can do. Coming the laws of Yom Tov, it becomes a bit different, because Yom Tov has a special verse that says that a person is that needs things for food are permissible on Yom Tov. So the question is, what does that include, and how much does that include? And can one just throw everything for Yom Tov? Things that you could do before Yom Tov, can you do on Yom Tov? Like there's a lot of things that could be done before Yom Tov, and they're not going to interrupt the joy of Yom Tov, that you want fresh, hot food. There's certain things that are not. For instance, although today we have most people are very into, if you're a food connoisseur or a meat connoisseur, you're going to be into aged beef or things like that. According to Halacha, back in the day, Talmudic times, the best meat you could eat is fresh slaughtered meat. So if you were to slaughter, again, the refrigeration equipment wasn't what we have today. So there's maybe various of reasons, but the general view of the halach is that fresh is best. Fresh food is what's best. And so therefore, because the fresh food is best, we permit most things unless there's mamish no benefit in preparing it before, on day. For instance, slaughtering an animal is permissible because the Torah says fresh meat that's slaughtered today is much better than meat that was slaughtered yesterday. So therefore, Yom Tov, you could slaughter if you need to eat. Now, of course, you can't slaughter just because you have a business and you want to get ready for the day after Yom Tov, so you could see if you have a butcher. It has to be things that you have to be able to eat. And with it becomes a lot of problems. When I say problems, I mean, for instance, it's permissible. It's permissible to have Gentiles at your table on Shabbos, where it's not permissible to have Gentiles at your table on Yom Tov. And the reason being is because Shabbos, the food is prepared. Where on Yom Tov, you're cooking. And you're not allowed to cook for someone who doesn't keep Yom Tov. I mean, someone who's not keeping the Yom Tov, who's a Gentile, doesn't have to do Yom Tov. So you're adding in work, and that's not permissible. So of course, there's exceptions to the rules, and there's the b'diavad if you already did. But there's a lot of things that are restrictions that are connected to Yom Tov that are not necessarily connected to Shabbos. Okay, so let's start. And again, we'll go through it slow. We're not going to rush in any way. I don't know that we have the full hour today. You can see already, even on the first law, there's 15 footnotes. So it's not exactly so simple. Especially those today also, some of us live in a way that everything we own, we eat, is bought. Meaning you go to the store, you buy flour. You go to the store, you buy eggs. You go to the store, you buy fruits and vegetables. But there are others of us, and today it's more popular, to have fresh laid eggs in your backyard, right? You have chickens and people who have ginot, people who have growing vegetables in their backyard, and people who are slaughtering their own animals. There's a place I know that's in the East Coast. They made a kind of a commune of some religious families out over there somewhere. I know someone who moved there who was telling me they have their own animals and they bring a shochat to slaughter, to come once in a while and slaughter the animals. So could be that maybe that would be something they would do in Yom Tov. Okay. So it says like this: Kol melacha she'asur la'asayis b'Shabbos asur la'asayis b'Yom Tov. The first line of the laws is that in general, whatever we know until this point that you're not allowed to do on Shabbos, you're not allowed to do on Yom Tov. That's the first statement. Now, once we made that statement, we're going to make exceptions to the rules. Kamoi, he gives an example. Just like you're not allowed to ask a Gentile to do things for you on Shabbos, you can't ask a Gentile to do things for you on Yom Tov. That's the example he gives. And just as a person has to allow his animals also, they can't work on Shabbos, so too that would apply. That applies to Yom Tov as well. The Ein ben Yom Tov l'Shabbos. So what is the difference between the laws of how we practice the laws of Shabbos and Yom Tov? Obviously, the symbol of it is different. Shabbos is celebrating is a day of rest and the creation. Yom Tov is a day of holiday connected to various different. And when we say holiday, we're not including, of course, Hanukkah or Purim. The definition of a holiday is the biblical holidays. So if we have biblical holidays, we have 5. I mean, we have the 3 main holidays of Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuos. Sukkot and Pesach are 7 days in Eretz Yisrael, 8 days in Chutz La'aretz, and Sukkot has, of course, the end of that called Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah, so it's kind of a 9-day Yom Tov. Then you have Shavuos, which is 2 days. So those are the 3 main holidays. Those are the holidays that you have to sacrifice special sacrifices. You have to go to the Beis Hamikdash. And then we have, of course, the Yom Kippur, and we have Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so those are the 5 holidays, kind of. Yom Kippur is not really included because it's a day of biblical fast, etc. Then we have, of course, other holidays like Purim and Chanukah. Those are not what? Those are not holidays that we're referring to. Okay. So what is the difference in Yom Tov and Shabbos? Is when it comes to food things. Now the thing is that food things are very inclusive, because in food, a lot of prohibitions on Shabbos are things that could connect some way or another to food. Shenemar, how do we know that food is different? Because we have a verse in the Torah. Anything that's related ya'achal to food, hu levadi, that's what's permitted that you can do. The hainu, and what's included in that. So he says what's included in that is that he says lisha, which is kneading the dough. Afia is baking the cakes or bread. Shchita is the slaughtering of the animals. Bishul is the cooking of the food. So that's all food related, of course. That's obvious. Then v'haitza, the prohibition of carrying. You need to carry to get things in and out of for food. V'ha'avara, lighting a fire, because you need a fire to cook. Muteris b'yom tov, they're all permissible on Yom Tov. And now we say, what about, am I only allowed to carry food outside? I can't carry, I don't know, my keys in my pocket? So now he adds to that. These things are permitted even if, the haitzah, the carrying, and the havara and the fire-related things are even if it's not directly related to food. And we're going to see that's not 100%. There's directly and indirectly, and then there's totally indirectly. Even if there's another reason, like our rabbis have said, because the saying the rabbis have used, so there was because these things were permitted for food, they became permitted totally. But it has to be for another reason. Okay. Now, he adds a law that says something that's interesting. What about if I wanted, so if I could light a fire, can I light a yard site candle? For a yard site. V'ner shel yard site, yoim zikaron laharav, if let's say your parents passed away on a Shabbos. Ein lahadik b'yom tov, you can't light on the Yom Tov. And look and say for Shailas Chuvas Imri Eish and Orach Chaim Simin Mem V'ayin Le'il Sim Seif Sim Tzadik. To discuss it more, he says, look at previous laws. Why would a yard site candle, if you could do things for a reason, even if it's not for food, then you should be able to light a yard site candle. So there's different reasons that are brought down. Some people want to say because it's totally not connected, or that you should be doing it in a synagogue better, he says, or light it before Yom Tov. There's different things about the yard site candle, but let's put that on the side for a second. Let's see the footnotes to give us insight about the breakdown of this law. Okay, so he says, any malacha, this includes all rabbinically prohibited work that you can't do on Shabbos, you can't do on Yom Tov. So it's not just biblical laws, but also rabbinic laws or prohibitions. However, the penalty of death applies to the desecration of Shabbos but not Yom Tov. So he says the punishment is different, but the prohibition is the same, meaning you're not allowed to do it. So that's the general statement. Anything that you're not allowed to do on Shabbos, can't do on Yom Tov, unless it's food related. And carrying and fire, once it's been permitted, it's been permitted for things that are for need, but not for food necessarily. For instance, if you live in a city that doesn't have an Erev, or you don't hold by the Erev, so Yom Tov, you could, because there's things that are connected to Simchas Yom Tov. There's been a lot of people, a lot of talks, and a lot of Musar, and a lot of people like to give a class to tell you what you can't do. I was in a place once, and for before Yom Tov, when the rabbi gave his lecture, so he was telling the woman not to carry on Yom Tov, so trying to be more strict. But it says clearly that to carry, you're allowed to carry. even if it's not food related. So to go in a carriage and shop, take a carriage and Shabbos, take the kids to shul, that's part of Simchas Yom Tov. Animal rest we learned about in Law 87, chapter 87. Footnote number 4. So too he's commanded to on Yom Tov. The Meiri Meseches Beitza 36, which the tractate of Beitza about eggs is the laws where they discuss the laws of Yom Tov. And the Beis Yosef 305, Magen Avram 246:12, Vilna Gaon Mishnah Brura 246:19, the Ramah 246:3, Rashi, Riva, and Pri Chadash, however, maintain that this is not prohibited on Yom Tov, about having your animals work on Shabbos. So it's not not everyone agrees to this law. 5 is like this. Meseches Megillah, where are we told? Meseches Megillah 7b. So only the things that are food. That's what we learned, right? One of the laws, one of the things we learned in Megillah, Ein ben Shabbos liyam. Number 6, he says that only that, let's read the verse in English, only that which is eaten by any soul, meaning a person, that alone may be prepared for you. So he says this includes, now let's see the opinions over here. Many types of malacha in the preparations of food are forbidden on Yom Tov. So even though it says anything food related is permissible, in the footnote he points out, 1 second, time out. In other words, going back to what's food related, you can go all the way back to the beginning. Because a lot of things we do very early back in the food chain eventually lead to food. For instance, harvesting, grinding, squeezing grapes, threshing, sifting. There's certain things that are just getting the food, so to say, ready for eating, but way back earlier, and could have been done well in advance before Yom Tov. Those things are not permitted on Shabbos, on Yom Tov. Shulchan Aruch 495-2 rules that these types are prohibited rabbinically. It's not biblical, it's rabbinic. While the Yerushalmi, Rashba, Rishal, Taz, Vilna Gaon rule that they are prohibited deraisa. So this is the question: is if things that could be done, like threshing and squeezing grapes, you don't have to make wine on Shabbos, on Yom Tov, if it's a biblical or rabbinic. So that's a discussion. But everyone agrees it's prohibited. They maintain that the Torah permitted only the kind of labor needed for one day's needs. That anything that you're preparing for that could be done in advance has to be done in advance, but not the kind of labor usually done on a large scale. Okay, so large scale work is not permitted. That was not permitted. That's not called ochel nefesh. Ochel nefesh doesn't mean things that are connected to food, but things that are connected to you eating today. Okay. Footnote number 8, he says, okay, what is this? See chapter for details. What are we talking about? Slaughtering and cooking and carrying. Lighting a fire. You may only light a fire from an existing flame. Okay, this is one of the main rules of Yom Tov. You cannot strike a match on Shabbos or a lighter on Yom Tov, sorry. You could use a fire, but it has to be an existing flame. That's why we have the Yortzeit licht, or you want to call it the Yom Tov licht. If you have a 2 days Yom Tov, or you have a 3-day Yom Tov, Shabbos, to have a burning fire at all times, some people, of course, you have to make sure your safety, will leave on a stove or an oven. These are things, you can't turn on the oven on Yom Tov. You can't turn on the stove on Yom Tov. Now, you could turn on the stove if you're using an existing fire, meaning if you have a gas fire, you could take a match, obviously in a way of safety, and put the match to an existing fire, carry that match over to your stove, turn on the gas, that's allowed. But you can't ignite so, and you have to be very careful. A lot of the stoves today have a igniter. That's almost, my stove, for instance, doesn't work. You can't turn on the stove without igniting it. You can, the old ones, you're able to just turn the knob and the gas start to run. Of course, that wasn't safe. Hold on, guys. Let me just finish this. You may only light it from an existing flame, but you are not allowed to produce a new flame. See paragraph 31. We'll get there. Yes, Rebecca first.
So like it's very challenging lighting candles on Yom Tov. You can't just like when you live in a small New York City apartment, you can't just like let the match like totally catch on fire and wait for it to burn because it's gonna make a lot of smoke and the smoke is gonna make the fire alarm go off. So like if you were to walk to the sink with the, let's say you you use the match from a yahrzeit candle or whatever, from your Yom Tov candle to light your, sorry, let's say you took a match, you got it from a kosher light, and then you lit your candles, and then you're walking to the sink with that to like just throw it in the sink. Is that okay? Because as you're walking, it might blow out because of the air.
No, okay. Listen, there's a lot. You're talking about extinguishing the fire. We're talking about not lighting. We're holding the lighting. We're not holding the extinguishing it. We'll get there, but just not to get too deep in this discussion, we'll get to more details. When you're allowed to, you can't light a fire. You can use an existing flame, and you can't put out a fire. And included in that, as we're going to learn, is turning down the stove. Now, to say that you have to be extra careful not to do anything that possibly could cause it to go out. There's leniencies, for instance, like you said, if you're walking regularly, not fast, just walking regularly, holding the match, most likely the match will make it to the sink, and you can just lie it in the sink to burn out. So that's allowed. For instance, when those who smoke, we're not discussing. We'll get to there's laws of smoking on Shabbos on Yom Tov, but those who smoke and they smoke on Yom Tov. So the question of putting out a cigarette, of course, these are all the questions that come up. So you can't even the questions if you could even, people like to de-ash the cigarette is also you have to be careful because that could be putting out the flame or a little bit. So there's a lot of things you have to be careful about putting out the flame. Yes, that's a good question. We'll get to that. But yeah, but just in general, the answer is that if you're going to do something and by doing it regularly, there's a chance maybe the fire is going to go out, but you're doing your thing. That's usually permissible. To say that you have to protect the match from going out, that's going to go out anyways. The question is if you're making it faster. Listen, many of us have had experiences on Yom Tov where you forget to light your Yom Tov candle or it goes out, what have you, and you have to get a friendly fire, right? So you go to your
Mm-hmm.
neighbor, get a fire, and many times you go and it's winter or it's windy and it doesn't make it, right? That's happened to me many times. You can't say I violated the Yom Tov because it didn't make it. I tried. I did whatever I could, and the wind came and blew it out. What could I do? That's right. That's how things are.
Right.
So that happens all the time. Of course, you try to protect it. You're protecting because you want the fire. But I've experienced that many, many, many times where you try to get a fire across and it doesn't work. So the same thing applies. You're walking, and if it goes out, it goes out. That's fine.
Okay, but the best thing to do is to leave it someplace where it can just go out by itself.
No, that it doesn't say that. You could walk it to the sink. To create even a possible fire hazard, it's not something you should think about doing.
Okay.
Aaron.
Hey, I'm just gonna say something about hers before I ask my question. Um, so I live in Brooklyn. Everyone I know, I can only talk about the people I know, especially my mother-in-law. They do the candle in the kitchen because that's where you're gonna cook. So there's very little movement, and the sink is right there. If there's a problem, or B, you want to put the fire somewhere where it can let itself out. So no one puts it that I know of
No,
in
yeah, but just I'm
No,
saying,
we want it where we light candles. We don't want it in the kitchen.
and lighting
why.
usually is in the dining room.
No, but I'm saying is the what I don't know. The candle's always by the
Okay,
stove.
but yeah, Aaron, you're right. But I'm saying, let's just say, in theory, there's different scenarios. That's technical. But the point, what Rebecca's saying is, if let's say you have your fire by the stove and your candles are on your table, so then you go into your table to light the candles. You're not lighting your candles by your stove. So
Okay, they
even
don't light any other candle by the stove, just the one used to light
yes, but
fires.
I know that. But the question is that you have let's say if you're a woman or a man who lights candles, right? And you're lighting your Yom Tov candles. Comes Yom Tov, you light your Yom Tov candles, second night,
Right,
right? So you need to transfer a flame from point A to point B because your flame, like you said, is by your kitchen. So you take a match and you get a fire, you light your match from the Yom Tov light that's lit already, right? Now you
right.
match over to your table to light your Shabbos
Okay.
candles, Yom Tov candles. You lit your Yom Tov candles. Now your match is still aflame, right? What are you going to do with the match that you're holding? So Rebecca is concerned to just let it burn out. It causes smoke and cause an alarm. So she wants to put it in her sink. Walking to her sink back could possibly
You
cause.
make perfect sense then. But number one is in the Jewish stores, there's extra long matches. So you could get to the kitchen.
Yeah,
Number
but
two is I never had my my alarm go off or my mother-in-law's alarm go off because of a match. It doesn't smoke enough.
There's different scenarios for different people. It's
But let me
different.
just add, okay, so I got that, but maybe you just walk your candle over to the where you're lighting them.
Yeah, but the candle. No, you don't. You usually want to light the candles as they are in the you're gonna in the candelabra. So that's
No,
so.
but I'm saying you walk your candle over, take your match, you have very little space.
Okay,
And
this,
then
this
you have a table, you have a tray. You put your candles on the tray, and then you set your match on the tray, and it just goes out by itself. We do that with Shabbos candles.
I know that, yeah, but first, so she doesn't want to put it out just like that. She wants it to be able to put it out so it doesn't cause the smoke. Rebecca's question, basically, what the essence of Rebecca's question is not what you're discussing, what we're discussing right now, the technicalities, but just the halachic question. If you're allowed to walk to the sink, if possibly by walking to the sink, it's going to put the flame out. That's the question. Is
Okay.
that?
Now my question was, but you kind of answered it already, because I remember I was at my mother-in-law's house. I don't know all picky details, but some guy said he had it by his window in the kitchen. It went out. Can I borrow your flame? And he transferred. He had some way to take some of the flame from my mother-in-law and walk back to. He was a neighbor. Walk back to his apartment and light
Yes.
his candle.
Flame is not a substance. It's not like you're dividing your flame into two. If
No, I
flame,
know that, but could he? You go someone who is not his candle,
you can.
but
You don't have to use your own candle.
and you can take as long. You can walk as far as you can keep the flame.
Yeah, I mean that's like I said, I've done it many times. I made many attempts, many failed, but we try as much as possible. If a lot of times, yeah, people or that either they forget to light a Yom Tov candle, or the candle goes out. Whatever. There's many things that could happen with regard to the fire, and we'll discuss more in details as we get through the laws, like having a Gentile turn on the flame on Shabbos, etc. But we're not going to get there now because we're just starting the beginning. Just
But
getting
could
off.
you leave your stove on if it had a flame?
Yeah, you could leave it on. Leave it. So again, there's two. To turn on an electric stove is not allowed. To turn up an electric stove is allowed. A fire. So an electric stove is considered like a fire. So if it's on low, you could turn it up or keep it on low. You can't turn it down because that's putting out a fire. Same thing applies to a gas fire. The problem is a lot of the gas stoves today, when you just turn the knob, it creates the flame. That's not allowed. The olden ones, and it's not so safe, you were able to turn the knob and just let the gas out, and then you had to put a flame to it, right?
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
So I know people who do that. They very, very quickly they put a match on it and they very, very quickly turn the knob so that it doesn't the gas comes out, but I guess it doesn't the flame doesn't come on, and then they use that to get a
So I,
light or to start cooking. Is that okay?
I've exercised that a few times in my stove to see if it's possible. At least in my stove, it's impossible. It's impossible to have. There's no split second that your flame will turn on the fire and not the igniter. You know what I mean? Yeah, there's different types of stuff.
No, but one person I know, their starter broke, and I said, "Why don't you fix it?" He says it's too expensive, and now I could use it on Yontif. Just
Okay,
flip
okay.
the match.
Yeah, so I'm saying, so listen, there's old types. Back in the day, early day, you had it push every time you wanted to make a flame on your stove. You turned your gas and you put a lighter to it. Of course, that's dangerous, right? Because the kids could turn it and then the gas just runs in the house. So they have kind of made it. They kind of played with that. When I in the '90s, when I was in New York, because in Seattle we grew up, we didn't have gas stoves. We had electric stoves. So at least where I lived. So we had. So then in New York they had where you could turn the flame and then you didn't have to use a candle. You had a little button that you pushed that ignited the turned on the igniter. You didn't have to use that. If you used the flame, it wouldn't happen. So that also is permitted on Yom Tov. Today, my stove that I have now in my house here in Jerusalem is as soon as I turn the knob, it triggers the igniter and it turns on and it lights the flame. You're asking if it's possible to get a candle in there before the igniter, depending on the make of your on the mechanism of your stove. I've tried a few times during the week to see if it's possible. It's not. It's impossible for me to turn it and get gas out before the igniter triggers it. That means there's no way, even if I pretend with the candle, the candle's not going to do it.
My sister does it really, really, really fast, and the like if you like bypass it somehow, like the fire doesn't turn on. I don't
Okay,
know.
I said there's different makes of yeah, maybe if you turn it very fast, it doesn't put the igniter on, the gas goes on. But by us, I think the one I have is the gas won't go on. If you turn it very fast, the match won't work either. So the gas won't come through. The gas won't start flowing unless the igniter goes on, something like that. I think that's the mechanism by me. Like if I do what you're saying, like really fast turn it and not let the igniter go on, so I turn the knob and I beat the igniter, but then the match won't work either. So different people have different mechanisms, different styles. Okay, let's continue. So hold on, footnote number 10. Most poskim, okay, maintain it's a deraisa prohibition to carry on Yom Tiv if there is no necessity. Okay, so then right away we have it. This is where the question comes up. Well, I told you about the rabbi who gave a speech before Yom Tiv. It says that if it's not necessary at all, you can't just carry for the sake of carrying. Rashi, Riyaz, and possibly the Rif and Rambam hold it's the Rabbanan. That's biblical. It's rabbinical. It's not the Araisa if there is no necessity at all. So no necessity at all creates a very big problem. What's the definition of necessity? Okay, our sages of blessed memory have ruled with regard again to fire and carrying in Masechtas Beitza, that if it's permissible, once it's permissible for even if it's not necessary, it's not food related. Even though carrying and lighting a fire are not melachas performed directly on food itself, they are necessary for its preparation, because you're not cooking food, but you're carrying things for the food, or the fire for the making the food. Melachas that are synonymous with food preparation, such I think would be as baking and cooking, are certainly included in the ruling and are permitted for other and are permitted for other necessities. Magen Avram, Magid Mishnah, Magen Avram, Vilna Gaon, Machzis HaShekel, etc. Okay, let's go to 13. Since the labors are permitted for the purpose of food, they are also permitted for the purpose for other purposes than preparing food. Okay, this is where it gets tricky. So he says Shulchan Aruch 4951 implies that malacha is permitted for food requirements, even if it could have been done before Yom Tov, would have the same taste. Most poskim, however, Ramah, Maharil, Eliyahu Rabbah, Pri Chodesh, maintain that this is forbidden. It means if there's no benefit in cooking today, then there comes a little conflict. If it's the same taste, not better taste, but the same taste, then you could still cook today. Others say no, if it's the same taste, cook yesterday. But permitted when done in an unconventional way, a shinoi. Ramah, Ran. If you were unable to prepare it before Yom Tov due to an extreme emergency, you may prepare it on Yom Tov in an unusual way, says the Shulchan Aruch Harav, the Alter Rebbe, and the Mishnah Berurah, Chafetz Chaim. If, however, you just don't have time to do it before Yom Tov, you must do it in an unconventional way. So it says, if you're unable to prepare before Yom Tov due to an extreme emergency, you may prepare it on Yom Tov in the usual way, But if you just didn't have time, not an emergency, then you have to do it in an unconventional way. So in an extreme emergency, you could do it in a regular way. If it's not an extreme emergency, you're just, not organized enough or what have you, then you have to do it in an unconventional way. Okay, we're talking about old foods that could have been done before Yom Tov, and you just didn't get around to doing it. But there's certain foods that are even better done a day earlier. Today we don't always maintain fresh is best, because some foods need to sit in the fridge for a night to really, get to its perfection. Then they could argue out with the various cooks of what's what. Okay. Okay, 14. Other than food, the Ramah 518 rules that it is permitted to carry something because you fear it'll get stolen or lost. Right? Let's say you have something that has nothing to do with food, but you just don't want it to get stolen or lost. The Mishnah Berurah 518 rules it is proper to be stringent like the Rosh, Tur, and Mariel, Rashal, who hold the necessity must be for a mitzvah or something you need that day in particular, such as ornament, etc. Means if you carrying on Yom Tiv, carrying the kids to shul is part of Yom Tiv, to go to Yom Tiv. Carrying food surely is not a problem. Carrying for absolutely no reason seems like you shouldn't be doing it. Carrying for a reason, but there's nothing to do with Yom Tiv, like protecting your wallet, but it could affect your Simchas Yom Tiv, then it's kind of a discussion if you should be stringent or not. If you want to carry, you don't want it to get stolen, that's not directly, but then you could say it's kind of directly to Yom Tiv because it's Simchas Yom Tiv. You're going to be in a state of anxiety if you don't move it. Okay, so that's up for the discussion. You should better try to be strict if you can. Number 15, the Ksav Sofer Responsum 65, his Shuvos, permits this. What are we talking about? About a candle, a yahrzeit candle. So the Ksav Sofer, the son of the Chassam Sofer, which is one of the great poskim of the Hungarian community, Tshuva 65, permits it to light a yahrzeit candle, but says it's still better to light it in the synagogue where you may light candles on Yom Tiv, as it's an honor to the synagogue for the shul to be lit up on Yom Tiv. The Miskeres HaShulchan says the custom to light them even at home, but it is best to do it in the synagogue, but you can't do it at home. This is also the view of the Bir Halacha 5145, who adds, if you light it in your house, you should do it in the room where you eat. So at least again, it's bringing benefits. It means to light the yahrzeit candle somewhere that's nothing to do with Yom Tiv, which is mamish separate from Yom Tiv. It has to do with your father or your mother's passing, which is nothing. It happened to be they passed on Yom Tiv. So there's a discussion if it's allowed to be done on Yom Tiv, because nothing really relates to the holiday. It's like carrying, not to lessen the importance of a yahrzeit, but it's in concept, halachically, it's kind of like carrying for something that has nothing to do with Yom Tiv, has nothing to do with even Simchas Yom Tiv. So therefore, if you could do it in a way that adds to Simchas Yom Tiv, like lighting it in a room where you'll be sitting on Yom Tiv, that's of course preferable and best also, according to most opinions, it seems like, to light it in the shul. Again, you can't do things without permission. Today, just to go into a shul and light a yahrzeit candle could be something that's against the shul's rules. So you have to check and see what the rules of the shul are before you get matches happy and start lighting candles in the shul. Not all shuls agree and permit to have candles lit in the shul on Shabbos or Yom Tov. Ein oising vina b'Yom Tov. Making cheese, for those who make homemade cheese, is not permitted on Yom Tov. Ein oising chema b'Yom Tov, or making butter. Or putting the milk in the keva, the stomach of the cow. The keva is the stomach lining, so that's also not permissible. Again, these are things that could be done before Yom Tov. Or any way that you make the milk turn into butter is not something we should do on Yom Tov. There's something about when you kind of sit. There's a way of something with the milk that you cream the milk. You skim the cream of the milk. That's something that can't be done. It cannot be done on Yom Tov. Incidentally, just a story that my grandmother, who grew up in a city in Romania, they had a farm. So they lived those days. There's no respectful person in those days bought eggs from a seller, or fruits and vegetables. Everyone had their own chickens and their own gardens and their own cows. So milk, dairy, vegetables, that was all homegrown, homemade. So she knew something or two about milking cows, etc. And so after the war, she herself survived the Holocaust by hiding in the city of Klausenburg. And working, I told the story, working in a cafe. She makes her way after the war to help in the recovery. She becomes a nurse in Germany for the recovering survivors. That's where she meets my grandfather. And she said my grandfather, after the war, a lot of this happened to a lot of survivors that although they felt somewhat healthy during the actual Holocaust under the pressure, but when things settled, that's when all the illnesses kicked in. and he was very sick. And she actually knew that by using the cream from the milk, that would help if he got sick with his lungs. That would help with his lungs, and it didn't. He survived. So there was a concept of skimming the cream of the milk. That's something you should not do in Yom Tov. So he says, you leave little on the milk the same way that is permitted to be done on Shabbos. You have to leave a little bit. You can't totally skim off the last remaining cream. You can't do that as a way of preparing milk for a future time, only for the Yom Tov itself. To do something for tomorrow, which again we're going to get into soon, deep into the laws of you're not allowed to prepare. Every woman knows, or a man who's involved in the kitchen knows that, for instance, when you go over from first day Yom Tov to second day Yom Tov, so you're going over that eve, right? You can't start preparing the food on the Yom Tov. You have to wait till Yom Tov goes out, means the time Shabbos would go out, let's say 8 o'clock. And then you could put the soup on the fire. Then you could put the chicken. Then you can start. You can't start preparing food before, let's say, the time Shabbos would end, means the end of the day, the first day, for that night, because you're preparing one day Yom Tov for the second day Yom Tov. It's not permissible. So even the 2 days Yom Tov have to be separate. You can't prepare. Have said, what happens if you feel that it's going to damage? It's going to become, the food is going to spoil if you leave it. Then you could have it done through a Gentile, as is explained in other places. We're going to learn. Let's just do footnote number 16. We're going to stop because I want to catch a tefillah before I have to go. He just quotes, this is the Magen Avraham Mishnah Brura. Anyone have any questions? Okay. So we're going to start next week from again, we're just getting to the basics of the law. A lot of these things have to come into question about how we prepare for the next day, what things are allowed to be made before Yom Tov or after. Well, obviously everything can be made before Yom Tov, but what things are allowed to be made on Yom Tov, what things have to be pushed off. Again, it becomes hachana. These things are problematic primarily on Yom Tov because of what's permitted. It creates a lot of questions of what is and is not permitted. For instance, as we discussed now, carrying for absolutely no reason, lighting candles for absolutely no reason, because it becomes a little tricky when something is permitted and then it's not permitted. So what is the definition? And that's why the laws of Yom Tov are somewhat more complicated than the laws of Shabbos, just because of finding that fine line in between what's permitted or not. Yes, Rebecca.
Just the PSA for everybody. So this year, one day of Rosh Hashanah is Shabbos and Yom Tov. So people need to know that Shabbos trumps Yom Tov. So just because it's also Yom Tov, you can't do things that are not allowed on Shabbos. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is regarding Yom Kippur, I've done a lot of learning, but somehow I did not realize until recently that I thought Yom Kippur was more like equivalent to Yom Tov. I didn't realize that like the 39 malachos apply on Yom Kippur in the way that they do on Shabbos. So like let's say like
Luckily, the only just in a kind of a second, the only thing that they were lenient on back in the days, they didn't today. It's not applicable so much. But where they used to put the vegetables in the water at the end of the fast, well, they permitted that. But otherwise, you're 100% right. Yes.
But like, let's say, like regarding lighting candles, like I thought you could light candles a drop late because it's like Yom Tov, and I also thought like if somebody is sick, if someone's like an older person who's sick, if they're not allowed to fast, they could heat up food the way that you could heat it on Yom Tov. I didn't realize that it's like Shabbos.
Yes, it's called Shabbos. Yes, thank you. These are excellent points that we're going to get to hopefully. But yeah, that's definitely true. Yes, Barbara.
Just to clarify, so I understand, because I thought when we were learning the laws of prior laws, where if you had like 2 or 3 days of Yom Tov and then Shabbos, you were able to cook one of the days of Yom Tov because to prepare for Shabbos.
Yes, that's the Eruv Tavshulin that we had. That yes, so when Yom Tov goes into Shabbos, we make a special Eruv. That's why we make the special Eruv that makes it permissible for us to prepare. Because of course you can't put up the soup on Shabbos because you're not allowed to put soup on the fire on Shabbos. You're not allowed to do fire on Shabbos.
That's when we have to say that special prayer.
Yes, so that's what we do.
Okay.
That trumps this concern, so we could have an Erev Tavshilin, so that it allows us to prepare somewhat for Shabbos on Yom Tov. Yes, excellent. Again, good. These are all very good points. And for instance, even if I'm not mistaken, Freddie Hargrove used to announce in Shul, and we'll get to it in London, even about the different things about preparing the candle. Today, again, depending on how you light Shabbos candles, if you're lighting liquids, today we have tea lights. But back in the day when people still had candles and the little silver foil receptacles, and you had to put the fire underneath to keep it in, all the tricks and preparing the candles. What is permitted on Shabbos on Yom Tov, going into the second day Yom Tov, and what is not, and when should you prepare the candles? All these things we'll get to. That it's not just so simple, like you said, Rebecca, that just because it's permitted, everything's permitted. Because it's permitted, therefore, we're very cautious in what is really permitted. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining. I'm happy again, Rebecca. Thanks for inspiring us for going this direction with Yom Tov. I think it's important laws. I'm surely need them to freshen up, so I'm happy to be studying them with you guys. Laila Tov, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Oh my God.